The Fort Lauderdale Strikers had just moved to Minnesota to become the Minnesota Strikers, still playing in the North American Soccer League, the first tier of American soccer at the time. So there is no pro soccer team left in Fort Lauderdale. So who else would become the owner of a new franchise in Fort Lauderdale to play in the United Soccer League, the newly formed second division of US soccer, than Ronnie Sharp, a former star midfielder of the Miami Toros. If you watched my previous two videos, you would know that the Miami Toros were rebranded and moved to Fort Lauderdale to become the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. So it's coming full circle. Actually, Ronnie Sharp did play one game for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. The 36-year-old now retired midfielder at this point in time became the first owner of the newly formed Fort Lauderdale Sun. He helped to bring the team to Fort Lauderdale for the inaugural season of the United Soccer League. Let me be very clear about the United Soccer League. This league is totally different. There's been many leagues over the years that have been called United Soccer League, but many of them have been different and many of them are not affiliated with each other. This one only ran for a couple of years, and it was created to replace the American Soccer League as the second division of US soccer. The American Soccer League had been around from 1933 to 1983, but then it kind of overexpanded over the years, and because of that, then they ended up having to fold. So this USL division was created keeping in mind the idea of overexpansion, so they were very cautious with that kind of idea. So in 1984, Teofilo Sabias, a star for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, actually signed with the Fort Lauderdale Sun. He clearly wanted to stay in Fort Lauderdale, and this was very clear because he actually signed his contract in a way that it promised that he would only play games in Fort Lauderdale. He wouldn't play any away games. So he was the former South American Player of the Year. He was a big name signing, especially for a second division team in Fort Lauderdale. And yeah, he wanted to stay there. There was also, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right either, Thomas Runyon signed, and Leicester City legend Keith Weller was signed, who played with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. He was signed to become the manager of the team, their first ever and only manager of the team. There were also some other star players signed. I'm not going to go through all of them. But the team would play in Lockhart Stadium, the same grounds that the Fort Lauderdale Strikers played in, but they weren't able to keep up much of the attendances that Fort Lauderdale Strikers got, and we'll get into that in a bit near the end of the video. So less than a month into the season, things started off weirdly. This is where it's kind of like, it really sums up how there's success on the pitch, but off the pitch things weren't going very well. So Ronnie Sharp, the owner of the team, who brought a franchise, a United Soccer League franchise, to Fort Lauderdale, he got arrested less than a month into the 1984 inaugural season. And why did he get arrested? It's pretty crazy. He was one of the people helping smuggle 200,000 pounds of marijuana from Colombia to the US, and he was arrested in Laredo, Texas. We found out later, at least from my readings, that just a bit of a brief reading on this, was that he was more of a middleman in the operation, if that makes it any better. But I mean, that's pretty bad that you're in a middleman in the whole drug operation, which is pretty crazy to have an owner of a pro soccer team, especially a star player like him, who you would think would have quite a bit of money in the first place. So despite all of these circumstances, Keith Weller, the manager of the team, was able to propel the team to finish with the best record in the league. He put them into the playoffs because of their great record, and as they progressed through the playoffs, they actually made it to the final. They played the Houston Dynamos, not the Dynamo, the Dynamos, and over a 3-leg final, they were able to beat them to win the first and only USL championship of this United Soccer League iteration. And that kind of tells you what's going to happen in the 1985 season to an extent, because shortly after that win, Ronnie Sharp was forced out as the owner of the team because he was arrested, and a group of mainly doctors and some businessmen bought out the team. So they bought out the team. The team was already on a pretty shoestring budget, wasn't doing the best financially, and the team continued to not do very well financially, got even worse under them because the rest of the league started really crippling. So at the start of the 1985 season, there was discussions of a merger between the North American Soccer League, which was really dwindling. It was ready to fail. So they were the first division, USL was the second division. They were having discussions over possibly merging, putting teams of the respective leagues into one division. It didn't work out. After that, after those discussions didn't work out, the North American Soccer League folded. There's no real proper first division league in the US. So what happened to USL? 6 teams folded, which was over half of the league. US soccer, I would say, was pretty decimated at that point, US pro soccer. But Fort Lauderdale Sun stayed alive, or you could say they kind of changed because that new ownership group, I think they kind of wanted to expand the market that they're appealing to, so they renamed the team from Fort Lauderdale Sun to South Florida Sun. So the season went on as planned. It started as planned and didn't end as planned. The team was struggling to pay its players, but then all of a sudden they just signed in June of 1985. They signed Dutch national team star Johan Neeskens, who became the star of the team, and he played one game and was never paid because they're already struggling to pay the rest of their players, so there's kind of no point of him joining. In hindsight, it's easy to look in hindsight about that, but yeah, things didn't really work well for him, at least in that circumstance. But it was kind of weird how they signed him when you're already struggling to pay the wages of the other players. And then basically the team was broke. The USL season actually ended early. There was only 6 games played. Of those 6 games that the South Florida Sun played, they ended up getting 4 wins and 2 losses, making it so that they won the League Cup, as they called it in USL, because they had the best record in the league, but the season was ended short. It was supposed to go on longer, but it was a pretty unstable climate. That iteration of the United Soccer League ended up dissolving after just less than 2 years. The South Florida Sun, their ownership, wanted to play a few friendlies in the summer, and that didn't really work out so well. They ended up playing 1 friendly in the summer, and that friendly was on Independence Day for the US on July 4th, where they got 3,000 people. They split some of the revenues with the players because those players were unpaid. As I've said, they were starting to not get paid near the end of the season because the team was in financial ruins, just like how the league was before they folded. And then 4 days later, on July 8th, the team ended up getting folded. So unfortunately, that was the end of the Fort Lauderdale / South Florida Sun. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. I also want to say you should go to funwhileatlasta.com. This is not like some promotion or something, but I got most of my research for this video, almost all of my research for this video, from that website. Especially early on in this series, I have to get a lot from that specific website because there's less information on this stuff. As we go on, I did this one research for a video later on in the series, and I barely got any information from that website, but I just think they've got a lot of information. I figured since I use them so much and I've used them so much throughout this series, you should probably check out that website. It's pretty valuable. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Please check out my other videos in this series. I'll leave the playlist in the description. And until next time, see ya.